Thank you so much for joining us. As I said, I am Julie Lammers with American Student Assistance. We are a national nonprofit focused on education and career readiness issues. And one of the big challenges that we see with young people as they try to prepare for the workforce is really trying to figure out how we align their career interests with long-term education and career goals. And how do we help young people articulate to employers the types of skills that they're learning while in school, so that they can be placed well in the workforce, that employers are getting what they need from young people and understand the types of skills that they have. And so I think over the last few years, we've definitely seen an uptick in skills-based hiring and conversations from employers saying that they are really interested more in the skills that young people have than the types of degrees they may have. The challenge is employers don't necessarily know how to verify those skills, how to understand what the skills are that young people have. And so the panelists with us today are some experts really trying to figure out how do we crack that difficult situation with getting young people to be able to articulate the skills they have, translate that into something that is valuable for employers, and work with employers to really say, what is it that you really need when we are preparing young people for the workforce? So three great experts on this with us today. Courtney Riley from SkillsLine. Maybe Courtney, I'll kick it off with you. You can do a little introduction and pass it off to Geeta.
Sure. Thank you so much. And we're definitely excited to be here today. Quick intro. I spent many years working with kind of advising education technology companies and working with K-12 systems on innovative practices and measures. And in 2020, I founded SkillsLine in order to bring explicit instruction of durable skills to young people. We've served over 70,000 learners to date and are now expanding to really think about and serve regional talent development ecosystems. So I will pass it over to Geeta.
Hi, everybody. Excited to be here. Thank you, Julie, for introducing the panel. So I am a professor of STEM education at the University of Colorado, Denver. I also serve as the co-editor-in-chief of the Journal of Science Teacher Education. And I have launched this platform called LiveDex. LiveDex stands for Lived Experiences. It's an artificial intelligence powered online credit for learning platform. And what we do is we enable students to convert their experiences into durable skills or transferable skills certificates and college credits. And on top of that, we enable students to take their experiences into AI guided customizable profile so they can make themselves more presentable, prepared in front of employers as they transition from education into workforce. So I'll pass it on to Dr. Moore now.
Hello, I am so excited to be joining the conversation. I am Dr. Kimberly Moore, and I have spent the 2 decades, as a matter of fact, working directly with industry as private sector CEO and then transitioning into education, serving as a leader both at the statewide level, but also on the national front when it comes to best practices. I am the founder, if you will, of Envision More Consulting Group, and it is a great conversation that we'll have today about how do we bridge the two. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that. So Courtney and Geeta, maybe I'll start with you. You've been working in this field for a very long time. I personally feel like we're hearing about skills-based hiring a lot more than we have in the past. Why do you think that this conversation is so important now and that this shift is happening?
Yeah, I think that 2024 may be our turning point in this conversation. Traditionally, our education system has been built on educators teaching the subjects that they get trained in, and they know how to evaluate those subjects. And over the last decade, as we've heard more and more from employers about how important these durable human skills are and that they're seeing them missing in young people who are coming into the workforce, it hasn't necessarily been clear what to do from the education side. And, so many educators do have really well established durable skills, right? But they haven't necessarily been trained in how to teach them. And that really is an entirely different discipline. So, and then there hasn't been a consistent way to evaluate them either. So, how do you try to scale against a problem like that? But I really think that we're now at a point where technology can offer real solutions that enhance what's happening in schools and classrooms, really for the betterment of everyone. At Skillsline, we saw how much need and demand there was to support this effort and to bring an understanding and teaching of durable skills into the classroom. And so we created an online platform that takes that whole discipline that educators haven't necessarily been trained in, brings it online, structures it, breaks it down into short, quick micro lessons that use interactive learning that can be brought into any educational program and sit alongside, and then enable the educators to really just have the discussions and build the relationships with young people that they were already doing. But now they have a basis underneath, and young people are really learning those skills. So that's part of the answer, I believe, and having technology solutions like this start to change what's possible. But I'll pass it to Geeta to talk a little bit then about the other side of that. There's the teaching, and then there's the evaluation. And I'm really excited about what she's doing on that side of it.
Before we move on to Geeta, maybe it's just a level setting about conversations. What are durable skills? That's a term that you've been throwing out. From our perspective, these are the essential skills that young people need in order to be workforce ready. Durable skills is a term that was coined by America Succeeds when they looked at job listings from across the country and found that in 70% of jobs listings, there were certain skills that employers were searching for. So they've termed these durable skills, things that we know all young people will need regardless of the job field that they're in. And so it really is then, how do we teach to those skills, evaluate those skills, and make sure people are learning those skills really, really well. So Geeta, on to you. I just wanted to make sure that we were all on the same page as to what we were talking about, but maybe you can go from there, Geeta.
Yeah, so as an academic, I like to pay attention to data. In fact, just today, an article came out in Inside Higher Education that the headline says more than half of recent four-year college grads underemployed. So they're not unemployed, but they're underemployed, right? We also hear this data about students actually walking away with degrees and their credentials, the hard skills, and not landing jobs or underemployed in their jobs. For the longest time, I think employers have sought to use 4-year degrees or 2 years degrees as proxy for these skills. But I think as we're moving into this new space of AI and automation, I think employers will be leaning more heavily on these durable skills that we keep talking about. Because how do you differentiate if you're going to have an employee that is remote, or even if they are in person, how do you make them work with the team and all that? So I think the data has been gradually moving in that direction, in terms of how do we actually prepare our students not only to have the technical skills, but also have the skills that not only enable them to land a job, but keep a job. So that's where I think the trend has been shifting. And I think I see more and more publications coming out that talk about this idea. So that's the first part of your question. The second part is the credentialing part of the question. So I always say that I don't know if it's a good idea to assess, transferable durable skills, because these are such nuanced, kind of a little bit, abstract ideas that folks demonstrate. So we call LiveDex as an educative platform. It's a platform that enables students to learn about their skills, and they can credential them simultaneously. So as I mentioned earlier, we enable students to document their lived and learned experiences. We're NSF funded, so we have framework in the background that comes from research framework. We also are doing research and development in AI that I'll be happy to talk about. And the goal here is to enable students to identify their skills in their lived and learned experiences. And if there are gaps, then the work that Courtney and team are doing, folks like those can come in and say, okay, let's help you kind of develop those skills, either by standalone curriculum or integrated in the curriculum that the students are participating.
That's great. So it's really a sort of a journey. So Courtney helps teach them, and then you help them articulate to employers what they have. So on the employer side, Kimberly, let's turn to you for a second. What are you seeing as employers are looking more and more for these types of skills, struggling to evaluate them, struggling to understand how do I hire for a very specific role based on the skills I know I need? Can you tell us a little bit what your experience is in this?
Sure, and I think I will level set with the audience because in the intro I didn't do that. So Envision Consulting Group is actually a national consulting firm where it really is focused on how do you connect those sectors, and specifically related to employers. Over 20 years working directly with industry on sourcing, recruiting, and then how to create the talent. So when it comes to what's happening in the workspace now, certainly with such a low unemployment rate, and that's not just specific to one state, but it's across the United States, then what do? So the trends are, you look at recruitment. Well, a recruitment, you're oftentimes looking at ways to improve efficiency. One way to improve efficiency is to look at the skills that are directly tied to the job description or job posting. By having skills-based hiring and actually by credentialing the skills that we're talking about, it actually prepares an employer to not only improve their efficiency, but even on the adaptability, because we know there is constant change in industry and in market. And as a result, we need to make sure that those foundational skills are in place. When you have organizations, certainly like the work that Courtney is doing, the skills line, and what Gita is proposing, that is what allows you to not only move faster, but certainly move in a more targeted direction. Probably 3 bottom line points that I would add to this from an employer perspective: that when you take on this approach and are looking at skills-based hiring and using tools that validate, you're going to have better matches. Better matches both from the position and candidate. The other piece that you'll see is improved employee performance. When you hire for the skills that employers looking for, you are better positioned to make sure that it's a fit for them as well as an employer. And then lastly, when it comes to organizational effectiveness, how do you save dollars? Well, you look at your hiring, your recruiting, and your retaining and training. And so skills-based hiring allows you to move in that direction. So there's this cry and this need, and here's a solution that we're putting forward.
That's great, Kimberly. And have you seen a shift from employers over the past few years towards actually changing their practices in order to do this better? I think for a long time we were hearing CEOs talking a lot about the fact that they wanted to hire based on skills, but it wasn't necessarily translating to HR departments that have to execute on this, have to figure out new systems and processes for hiring based on skills rather than a degree. Do you feel like that shift is beginning to happen?
So, Julie, you said a mouthful on that, because you are right. Decision makers are more apt to put this forward as an idea because, one, it expands your talent pool when you think about it like this. The challenge, however, is not the what, but then the how. So I think when Courtney talked about this being a prime conversation, knowing that there are resources and support that can actually help you in carrying that out, that is exactly what we're talking about today. But yeah, there is keen interest, but the next step is the how. Mm-hmm.
That's great. And Courtney, what are you seeing as barriers when talking to both employers and educators for moving in a direction of more of skills-based hiring?
Well, I think Kimberly referenced one of the things a minute ago, which is that job candidates don't necessarily know how to articulate those durable skills. They can articulate the technical skills, of course, but it's much harder with the others. And part of the solution to that, which is why we're having this conversation today and excited about it, is teaching young people what these skills are in a language to describe them, and giving them opportunities to build some measure of, or gain some measure of, credentialing around them, which AI through Gita's platform is now allowing. So that helps towards that barrier. Structural barriers in education that we've been talking about forever are around, seat time and the creating the time and space against all of the other things that schools are doing for this. But I think one other barrier that I'd like to bring out is a little more beliefs based, which is that you know these are skills that are innate rather than teachable, or that somebody else is going to take care of it, and I only need to look at the people who come to me clearly able to articulate and demonstrate. And I think both of those are really challenging. And the more that we can have these conversations and the more that we can put evidence out into the marketplace and the literature that says, no, we can absolutely teach these skills. And um, given changing demographics and workforce needs, everyone has a stake in being a part of the solution here. Oh, Julie, you're on mute.
Maybe a good opportunity then to talk a little bit more about how Skills Line practically works, working with schools to make sure that educators and young people have what they need in order to start building these skills and be able to articulate these skills to others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll try to keep that very short. But we work with K-12 schools and districts, community colleges, workforce development organizations, all places that are preparing young people. We kind of think about ages 15 to 30 to be productive when they move into the workforce and to have opportunity. And so our the Skills Line program is online micro lessons that really break down what these skills are, make sure that learners know the language of the skills, how to identify them in themselves and in others, and then what practical things they can actually do to start demonstrating those skills. And the other side of it is that we work very closely with every one of our clients around training and development and implementation to help them think about how to have the conversations with their learners about how these skills play out in their context, whether that's in a high school, whether that is in a community college situation where most learners are also employees and full-time workers, whether that's at home, or whether that's in a short-term workforce program where they know where they're going to end up afterwards and need to know how to deploy those durable skills into a particular type of workplace and role.
That's great. Gita, can make a shift to you for a second. Love to hear more about Lived X and how you're bringing AI in to this process of helping young people once they've learned the skills, articulate those skills and credential those skills going forward.
Yeah. So LiveDex is a metacognitive platform where students get to reflect on their thinking and what they've learned, basically. And the way we're doing this is that we've created a research framework. We call it LiveDex framework that comes out of 5 frameworks that Howard Easel Project has put forward. So they're mapping like 42 plus frameworks based in this, employability, durable skills, social emotional, all of those things. We've taken 5 of those frameworks and created student facing language. So one of the things when I looked at the framework was we always talk about that students need to demonstrate these skills. And I always question, how do students articulate these skills? Like, are they using the same language as us adults, as educators, as employers? Because students talk about it differently. So we kind of flipped it on its head and made it student facing. And so we now invite students to talk about their experiences, whether it's conflict resolution, whether it's taking care of your mental health, whether it's helping other people, any of those things, right? So those prompts, it's a very guided process. And students then use the guiding process. They take the prompts, and then we have 5 reflection prompts that they use that is developed by our social emotional learning expert. What happens is that when they respond to those 5 prompts, it creates a mini essay, basically. And I won't go into the research that went into developing the AI that we have developed. But basically, the AI will come and tag that experience with skills. Like, okay, in this this particular experience, you're demonstrating the skills. It could be social emotional skills, it could be academic and professional skills, collaboration, communication. Because think about it, even if a person is an excellent communicator, it is not only just about communicating, it's about the social emotional growth they have, the academic professional skills. They're not isolated skills. So the way it works is that based on their submission, they start to get these micro credentials that are in these 7 categories that we have coming from the framework. And they start to stack those micro credentials now into certificates to get to a certain threshold. And then they can actually stack it to a level where they can actually earn college credits through our partnership with University of Colorado, Denver. So you can actually, I'm using the word actually too many times. You can earn college credits that are focused on durable skills. So we are also pushing on the notion of achievement beyond technical, uh, hard skills, because these are also skills and they should have a place in students' academic transcript. And we're already doing that work. The AI part of it basically is, of course, if I don't like to use it as an assessment tool, but if you were to go into the assessment conversation, the tool needs to have validity and reliability, and we can go into that. But from the AI side of things, we want to make sure our AI is being fair to most of students, because AI can be biased. So our AI is assigning credentials to our students of color and girls as much as it is giving it to majority students. Our AI is not missing credentials, because in AI, when you have a data set as diverse as ours, you can have domain drift. So we have all those problems that we're trying to solve through our NSF SBIR grant. That's the R&D. But eventually the outcome that students get is basically different kinds of credentials, certificates, college credit. And then through Gen AI, what we're doing is we are letting students use their data and create their profiles, whether it's for a job profile, for a scholarship profile, for a college admission profile. If they want to create a LinkedIn profile, they can do that. It's customizable based on their data. And we're using extensive R&D in the background to give them the output that helps them to move forward and promote themselves. So that's kind of the way we are doing the AI part of work.
It's so exciting, and I feel like it's going to be so sort of game changing for the field. Kimberly, love to hear your thoughts on how you would use a tool like this to help evaluate young people or help with the hiring process.
Yeah, so I think when you think about the pain points that employees are certainly experiencing now, whether it's time and resource allocation, whether it's mismatched candidates, adaptability to change, the idea of knowing that both education and other partners, especially with the work that's happening with SkillsLine and even with data, that there will be a common language, a signal that they can all count on that is very much transferable, same language, same diction, that they can point to and know that if we're saying this is what it is in education, this is what it means in industry. To have that common framework, I think will be a game changer. And again, it will allow for more inclusive hiring and really looking at for those communities where individuals, may not have the traditional credential, if you will, but they have those validated skills that we're talking about right here. And we know that those are the foundations for an employee to be successful. That yes, that is a new conversation starter. And, again, when you think about workforce and its evolution and what those challenges are, hey, this is something that I believe not only can industry embrace, but also economic development. I mean, I certainly don't want to leave out partners like that, our chambers, education. It's really something that everyone can end up rallying around without question.
That's great. And that sort of follows to a question that we had in the chat about how this fits with working and unemployed adults, not necessarily students, who are trying to develop skills that they don't now possess and then they need in order to get to the next level of employment. Courtney, Geeta, do you want to talk a little bit about that population and how you're working with them?
Yeah, and I certainly didn't intend to leave that population out because it is also so important, and we are working in that space too. These same solutions can be applied for adults as well, for sure. Um, and I would say that one opportunity when you think about that type of population that is trying to get into a stable, sustainable career path is that there's a lot of lived experience there. And teaching the skills that allow people to see how their own lived experience has actually enabled them to develop and use so many of these durable skills, that and then recognizing that those are valuable to employers, potentially even more so than technical, which are generally easier to teach. um, is such a can provide such a sense of self-agency and empowerment, which is just critical when you're working with that type of adult population who's trying to make a significant shift. And so I think the role that these solutions play is the same, potentially even more powerful, because it has the ability to really change a mindset and empower individuals.
Yeah, I want to bring this idea about, I mean, body of literature around funds of knowledge and social cultural capital that we all demonstrate. Uh, but for various reasons, we know that there are inequities in our education system. That's why we have certain groups of students performing better than others. And I feel like uh, leveraging people's lived experiences, that means we're meeting them where they are and creating an asset based lens around their experiences is the first step. So we create a welcoming, nurturing environment. So we can have folks do that, absolutely document their lived and learned experiences, and start to build their portfolio and credentials that they can actually use to communicate to employers. Now, if there are gaps in that space, that's where, the work Courtney is doing can come into play in terms of integrating or building those skills or having a conversation. We can also have them, like if they're learning content and other than embedding these skills in the content, right? Similarly, on the AI side also, so again, I talked about, inequities in education. We have such a deficit lens even in education. Like we always try to say, what are you missing? Like, what are you missing? We don't start with what is it that you have, right? How many times you've gone and written an exam and you studied all that and they never asked you that thing. They asked you the things you didn't study, right? So that happens. AI can do that as well. Our AI structures can be used to do exactly the same thing, which is finding deficit. So we have very intentionally designed LiveDex to position AI in a way that leverages people's strengths and their assets, and then providing them a pathway by giving credentials. So I feel like there are ways to do this, and AI is new, and every day we hear new things. It's just hard to even keep up with what's happening in the AI space. But providing these opportunities for folks, especially the audience question about folks in poverty, I think that's a great place to start, to have people talk about what is this that they bring to the table and how can we identify and recognize that.
That's wonderful. Kimberly, there are so many credentials out there for employers to say, to try to evaluate evaluate a candidate. I think over 1 million credentials right now.
Yes.
And young people don't understand them. Employers certainly don't understand them. How do we, what do you think is most important in helping employers accept something like a LiveDex credential? Cut through the noise of everything that's out there and say, why is this in particular, this focus on skills rather than degrees, so important for employers right now?
So I think, rather than, say there's 1,000 credentials, I think always with business and all my experience over the 20 years is speak to the bottom line. What are the pain points? If you can address the pain points, which we know up front is by way of recruiting, and how do you expand the talent pool, and how do you make sure at the same time that it's not a revolving door that you're creating, but you're also creating a foundation for retention. I think that, so speaking that language that speaks specifically to the pain points, the triggers, and having that be the cascading conversation that moves from the decision that they're saying, yes, I want to address those, to then being positioned to talk to the talent managers as well as HR professionals about the how and the why. I think what's been so important for me with the conversations that I've had both with Courtney and Gita is it's in recognition that this isn't a standalone solution. It is in collaboration. So it is involving whether it's the WIOA boards around the nation whose commitment and goal is to get individuals employed. It's for our educational institutions as well, who are of course training, but we need to couple this skill here that really it's an all-in kind of proposition where we're all part of the solution. And so I think that's how we target it to employer. We're not slicing and dicing. We're saying that this is a whole effort and solution to bring forward to you, and this is the how.
That's really helpful. We talked about this a little bit, but I think we are really focused on how do we bring greater equity to hiring, and I certainly see these types of skill building activities as a way of ensuring that we're doing that. I love your perspective, each of you, on how your solutions are really trying to drive that equity in hiring piece.
I'll go ahead and start that one. Yeah, that is so important and a huge driver for what we're doing at Skillsline. And if we think historically about how people have developed durable skills, it's frequently through everything that's happening in their life, generally outside of the formal education system. Um, and that has changed a lot over the years, particularly with the advent of our phones and social media and living much more of our life inside devices. But also with changing economic conditions. And, a lot of kids are growing up with parents who work multiple jobs. They're not necessarily home all the time. And that's a reality. We've also just seen, fewer opportunities in many cases for some of those like after school activities. A lot of those things have costs to them. There's just a lot of ways in which young people aren't necessarily exposed in the same way that they may have been prior. And we also, let's not leave out historical inequities, never even thought about that for a lot of populations within our country and didn't care enough. And so, what we're trying to do is make sure that every young person, every person who needs these skills actually has an opportunity to learn them. Just like we teach reading, we teach math, we need to teach the durable skills that do form the foundation for future work life. And every person should have access to learning that language and learning what they are.
I'll build on that basically. So I'll talk about both on the workforce side and the education side. So I want to share the title of another article, research article that came out, which talks about that AI writing assistance on job seekers' resume increases hires. I mean, that's what the research is finding, right? Now, ChatGPT is available to everybody, right? When ChatGPT came out, the first thing school districts, there's many of them, they basically banned it, right? Like can't use it because students are going to use the worry was that students will use it to plagiarize it. Now, students who had access to ChatGPT at home continued to learn to use it, continued to learn to use it for various productive or unproductive reasons, right? However, so there's educational inequities being baked into the system, education system now based on AI already, which is what is happening, right? So what we are doing through LiveDex is we are actually providing language to students. So students have these experiences, work experiences, life experiences, they have their degrees or diplomas, certificates, internships, whatever that is. It is very hard, even as an adult, for me to write about a one pager when I apply for a job, my cover letter. How hard is it? It takes me days and days. I run it with my colleagues. I have other resources. I'm privileged that way, right? How many students are in that situation? Not many. A lot of students don't have that privilege. Like Courtney talked about, we have kids whose parents may be working, different jobs. They're not being able to support them. We have first generation students who don't have their parents who can support them through from college to workforce. AI can actually help and support, and the research is basically sharing that. If we can create these tools that enable students to come use AI in positive ways, then we can actually elevate and decrease the inequities, especially using AI in certain aspects of our educational offering. So that's the workforce side. So that's what we try to do. We are letting these students come to the platform and create their profiles, create the job profile, whatever that is. We're trying to make it as customizable as possible. On the education side, think about many colleges have now have banned essays because students who had ChatGPT or access to private consultants to write these essays, they hire people, right? And their essays will look like, my God, like it's like written by, but students who don't have that, they can't. And colleges are like, we're not going to use essays as part of many colleges, right? Now there are going to be other ways, right? Many of them are coming back to SAT and ACT and all those things. Colleges will come up with new tools which will enable students to present new opportunities for their learnings. A portfolio of durable skills could be something a college may include in their application process. How will students document that, right? So that's something we can enable students to do that through the platform. And again, it's using AI, and it's creating level playing field because everybody gets to do it. It's not like if you don't have it, you don't get to see. So that's the way we're thinking about equity in terms of making sure the systems and the tools work for all students, and it creates that learning opportunity that is not dependent on the zip code where they were born.
Yeah, that's so important. But you hit on a really tough point around AI and it's sort of the lack of credibility in some fields, given what you said earlier about bias that is inherently baked into some AI. How are you helping both colleges and universities, employers see the value in the tools that you're creating that are really AI driven, and that there is so much value there. There is so much opportunity there to actually level the playing field a little bit better, and use these tools in order to help young people?
Yeah, that's a great question, Julie, and that's something I think we are all grappling with in terms of AI. So, what we have tried to do is kind of bring that research focus into it. So we have a team of researchers both in the AI field, but also in social emotional learning and employability. So these colleagues of ours are basically making sure that we have the quality control and the guardrails to make sure that the output that students are getting have some value. Now, whether employers will accept it is a totally different thing. We are going to be
That's a
doing
question for Kimberly.
yes. But we're trying to do a pilot with one of the employers just to see if that is something we can start to communicate. But these are very early stages of this conversation. But we are focusing more on the credential side of thing and the quality of those credentials using both AI and the educational research, and then trying to see how that maps out in terms of compared to academic credentials, that's why I kind of shy away from the assessment piece of it, because if we get a C in math, we know what that means. But can you get a C in communication? Does that mean you will never become a better communicator? Is that even the model we want to pursue? I mean, I want to open it to the community that we have here. I mean, that's something we need to talk about. So yeah, Kimberly, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
So, I consider myself always the advocate of the end game. And the end game is that we want to see an expanded workforce that is representative of the communities that we're in and the nation that we're in. So, yes, leveling the playing field, but I would say with any initiative, especially of this type, because it really is revolutionary when you think about it, employers must be engaged. Value is determined by those who are participating. And so employers will need to be at the table with this conversation. I love that with Skillsline that is already baked into the approach, that employers are right there front and center, because we can't just create independent value. It has to be shared value. To that end, it's not just, and I love that, we are talking about the pipeline of young people coming from education. But remember, employers have a workforce that's there to the incumbent workforce. So I think it's important to talk about that conversation because, again, going across a variety of industries, there are a number of jobs that we can all point to that if individuals were to be provided additional skills, empowering skills or tools, they would be better positioned to look at a pathway for, I call it increased empowerment when you talk about economic mobility. Well, that's what happens with Skills Line 2. That's a path for that as well. So yes, employers need to be front and center in the conversation. Second, let us not forget the incumbent workforce and what we have an opportunity to really open a door for creating a ladder for them, and at the same time create a talent pipeline coming out of our educational institutions.
That's great. So helpful. So before we, love to have people chime in the chat if you have questions, and we can address those as well. As we're looking forward, love to understand where you each think the greatest opportunities and the greatest challenges are to expand this work over the next 2 to 5 years. We've seen a lot of conversation. I'd say in the last 5 years, Courtney, you and I have been on many panels discussing this topic, and I think we've seen a lot of progress. We've seen a lot of increased engagement and interest. In some employers that we are seeing are shifting their practices. So it is happening incrementally, but how do we get to a place where this is sort of universally accepted wearing? And what do you think will help get us there? So maybe, Courtney, I'll start with you, and I'll give Kimberly some time to think about it.
I feel like those were about 4 really big different questions. But I will say that I'm going to echo what Kimberly was just saying, which is that getting employers involved in this effort, I think, is one of the most important things that needs to happen. And primarily partially that's because they can push some of our systems to change. Partially that's because they're employing the workforce currently, to Kimberly's point. And to the extent that they recognize that durable skills, the ones that they're looking for and the ones that are so critical to improving middle management practices and leadership practices, which improve retention and that can enable that type of economic mobility and hiring from within, and lifting people up. All of that comes from a belief that durable skills can be taught and can be developed, and that can be done intentionally. And so that, I think, is the biggest opportunity and message that I would want to kind of get out there and leave with.
That's great. Gita.
Yeah, I think the opportunities are in the use of AI. I mean, I think that's definitely available to us to use it to create, uh, you know, um, creating pathways for students, whether they're going out in the education or job force. The opportunity is also to use technology for good, for creating equitable opportunities. Um, but the challenge is whether folks who want to use this outcome, just like Kimberly said, to what end, if those folks would want to use it, and will it solve anything for them, whether it's employers or higher education or K through 12, it needs to solve a critical problem for different stakeholders. And that is something that, as we are in this fast moving technological development, I'm curious to see how these tools get embedded in structures, whether it's HR systems or high schools or universities, and improve outcomes for those stakeholders, both for students and institutions.
Great.
So, from my vantage point, I believe that we have to create the environment, the future, the whatever that we want to see. And part of creating that is that we have an opportunity to establish a playbook. this conversation that we're having here is a playbook for, if implemented appropriately and we connect the dots with all the key stakeholders, that's what I imagine the future being, a future that is founded on this whole notion of that when sectors come together and that we establish a solution, if you will, not only for the present, but one that points to the future. If we don't address it, then, I believe we're setting ourselves up for failure, because again, the workforce challenge is not one that we can, put under a rock or cover. It is one that is front and center. And if we want to continue growing and being as aggressive as we are as a nation, we're going to have to present a ready workforce. And that really means uncovering the hidden talent, tapping into those areas that we wouldn't normally do that. Well, in order to do that, we have to have a game plan that looks at everybody and it looks at everything that they bring to the table, their complete value. And part of that is what we would be able to do by validating those skills. So, Gita, I'm excited at what the future will hold. I'm excited from a perspective of what I do, of having conversations with employers that help them to understand that this is a vehicle for moving forward and not one that would allow them to move backwards. I mean, everything moves too fast to not be solution focused. So, Julie, that would be my point.
Yep, that's great. I think so. ASA did some research last year with Jobs for the Future, and we found that 72% of employers do not think degrees are a reliable way of assessing the quality of a candidate, but they feel like they have no other alternative. And so I think tools like this that Gita and team and Courtney are working to promote and to ensure that young people not only are building the skills that we know are necessary for the workforce, but can actually articulate them and credential them in some way so that employers see the value and say there is actually an alternative. We don't need to keep defaulting to a degree, because we do understand the value that this young person is going to bring to our workforce. A huge opportunity going forward. I think very excited to hear all that you guys are doing. Love to open it up for any other thoughts or questions as we're winding down here. Couple of comments in the chat, but I don't see many questions. Other than people seem to really like the direction that this is headed. So if we have no other questions, we can leave it there. But yeah, Gita, you came off mute. Did you have something else you wanted to contribute?
Oh no, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you.
So Courtney, Gita, Kimberly, really appreciate you joining us today. It's a great conversation. And I think the start of a continued conversation about how we bring together both education, workforce, and technology to really make change for young people. We have sort of long said that neither employers nor educators can do this on their own. We need to figure out better ways of collaborating because there isn't a solution that's going to come from one sector over the other. And so really thinking very deliberately about how we bring all the parties together to make this work is going to be necessary going forward. So thank you so much to SkillsLine for hosting us today. Gita and Kimberly, thank you for joining us. And I believe all of the panelists have their information available if there are follow-up questions or other things that we can respond to. So thanks so much.